Dr. Peter Coppin, Assistant Professor in the Faculty of Design, is an inclusive designer, the visual artist, and cognitive scientist. His work seeks to improve information access through a better understanding of how individuals make use of their diverse perception, motor capabilities, and cultural background to interact with interfaces and other design artifacts. Peter is going to present with the title Multisensory Data Cube, anticipating an inclusive multisensory data analysis paradigm.
Okay. Thank you. So, yeah, thank you for the introduction. And, oh wow, this keyboard's really low. Okay. So, so I'm going to talk about a perceptual model that we've been using to inform design. It comes out of the work I did during my PhD, but I've advanced it into the area of inclusive design while at OCAD University, okay? And the context is that every discipline sort of goes through this evolution from being a craft to something that becomes more like well, not every discipline, but many disciplines go through that evolution. So those of you who are interested in engineering wasn't always practiced as a science, right? The classic example would be something like chemistry and how to emerge from alchemy, okay? Without alchemy, we wouldn't have had the raw materials and the questions that led to chemistry. And very much of design is operating in that territory, okay? And so the work we're doing is sort of part of this area where we're bringing the science of perception and cognition to solve practical design problems, okay? So, so then there's a compelling problem that we're applying this to, and these are inaccessible charts and graphs. And by inaccessible, we mean visualizations that are not accessible to people who are blind, okay, or who have low vision, okay? So for example, there's an entire field that you know about, because it's part of the topic of this conference, called information visualization, okay? But not everyone accesses digital media visually. They use technology called screen reader, which basically turns everything into a sentence, okay? And I might get into some differences between pictures and sentences if it makes sense to do that, right? Okay? Also I'm going to talk about our long-term vision, which is a vision for multisensory data analytics or non-modally specific data analytics, so that information could be encoded and represented in such a way so that it could be rendered out through the perceptual mode, vision, sound, or touch, that is most useful to the person trying to use it, okay? All right. So let me just illustrate, foreshadow a little bit about what we mean by multimodal external representation. Now, when I use the word external representation, I'm contrasting this to internal representation, okay? In cognitive science, there's been a lot of work trying to understand what they call internal representation. Like, for example, do we have mental imagery, or is it more propositional, like a sentence? This was a big debate, like in the 90s, right? Okay? Our concern does not deal with internal representation, okay? Our concern deals with external representation, such as pictures, diagrams, and text that you see in the physical designed world, and how those similar representations through touch and sound are also in the designed world. And so is there a pointer? I guess not, that's fine. So over there, you see this shape, a visual graphic showing this shape, okay? And say it's meant to depict a mountain, okay? All right? Well, or this sharp angle, okay? Well, you can also present that through sound, and I'll show some examples of that through a change in sound frequency, okay? You could also have a tactile surface that represents that, okay? And it could also be represented through gesture. And sign language is actually literally that gesture that individual is making means mountain, okay? No, actually, I think it means hill, okay? Mountain is actually like that, okay? Now the interesting thing about everything on the left there is if we were just talking about visual information, you might call the marks the so-called pictorial properties of the graphic, okay? The light reflecting from the surface. But to be more multimodal, we can refer to these as iconic representations, the thing that it represents. This is the idea that the representation itself has some resemblance to the thing it represents. So for example, there's some idea that the shape of the line at the top somehow corresponds to the way a mountain looks. Or the gesture at the bottom in the sign language example somehow corresponds to the way the mountain looks, right? But then you have another type of representation which we see on the right, which we would think of as the symbolic properties of a representation, okay? And what we'll get to is that these are the conceptual categories that the concrete structure falls under, okay? So for example, if I have the word mountain, many possible shapes could fall under the category of mountain, okay? All right, and so there are these different affordances or possibilities for communication for these different types of representation, right? We've been looking at these classic challenges. Is anyone not familiar with this graphic that I'm showing on the screen? Raise your hand if you do not know what this is. Okay. All right, a lot of people don't know what it is. Okay. Actually, it might speak for 30 minutes or 20 minutes. 30 minutes. Okay, good. All right, we can track. Okay. So this is from the 1800s or 1900s? 1800s. And Richard will be giving a more detailed demo of what we've been doing with this. But this is in the field of information visualization. This is one of the examples that really inspired it, right? Because what you have is Napoleon's march from, we thought it was Paris, but actually it's some other European city on the left, okay, over here, okay? And it shows his march on Moscow, which is up there on the right, okay? And it shows his return trip. So you've got the map information. But the other thing on this that's really important, that really inspired people, is you have the quantity of troops shown through the thickness of the line, okay? And so as you see, it starts off, the line is very thick, and then you're marching towards Moscow. It gets thinner and thinner. There's a battle at Moscow. Actually, not that many people seem to die in that battle, and then they start retreating, more and more people are dying. The winter sits in, the temperature is dropping, which is shown through this line right here. And then you really see the contrast when you get back, okay? Where it's just this devastating troop loss, okay? A dismal failure of a campaign. And so this is really exciting because all of these dimensions of information are shown through one representation. But how in the world would you do that through sound? How could that be done, right? And so we tackled this grand challenge. Not that we thought we could solve it, although I would say we're like 90% there, okay? But because we knew that lots of great ideas would come out of this, okay? So another thing we've been working on simultaneously is in the area of blood flow visualization, okay? So this is a snapshot from a computationally generated simulation of blood swirling around inside a brain aneurysm, okay? Now the clinical problem here is that when someone has a brain aneurysm, a balloon-like defect in your head, okay? That is potentially devastating, okay? But also the operation to repair that damage could be equally devastating because it requires cutting into your head, sawing into your skull, pulling open brain tissue, something that could be more damaging than the aneurysm itself. And so the question is, how could one simulate the type of pressures inside this blood vessel in order to decide whether or not someone should intervene, okay? The way these have been done for 20 years is visually, and I'll show you a visual one without sound, and then I'll show it with sound. Okay, all right. So this is the way it's usually shown. Okay. Wait, why is the video not play? Oh, that's because it's in a different screen. Interesting. Tech guy. He'll fix that. Okay. So that's the way it's usually represented. Now let me show an early attempt to sonify it. if I don't blast out your ears. Now the goal with this is a slightly different context. We're not necessarily trying to make this representation accessible to people who are blind. What we're trying to do is improve pattern detection capabilities for specialists, okay? Because there's actually certain signals that they're easier to perceive through sound relative to vision, okay? And so here the goal is amplification, but by tackling these two problems simultaneously, there's a lot of cross-fertilization. And so just to foreshadow what we're going to get to in the end, okay, what we're finding is working really well is actually a different paradigm, okay? And so we call this the World of Warcraft paradigm because it's this idea that instead of looking at this rectangle, we're trying to sonify that, and there's lots of conditions for that. What we're doing is replacing the person within this world, and so it sounds more like a series of tornadoes looking around you, okay? And there's some intuitions that can help you understand like why you think this is effective, okay? Think about the way vision and sound works, and this is really demonstrated when you're walking down the street and you run into a bad pedestrian, okay? They plug into their earbuds, and you're trying to walk around or something, and they just cannot detect that you're there. Has anyone experienced that? Wow, I experience this like every day, okay? And, or maybe you guys are plugged in and you can't notice. But basically, what that suggests, okay, is that one of the things, and we know that hearing is optimized for the horizontal plane. We know it's really good at direction. And I mean, and it has lots of different purposes, obviously, right? But certainly when you're navigating a city, certainly one of the things that affords is letting you know, it's like the eyes on the back of your head. It's like extreme peripheral vision, right? So whereas vision, it's very high density and focused in this parallel processing way in front of you, sound is very good at the horizontal plane, and that's why we think this convention is working, okay? And the other thing that Richard will be showing is applying that to solve this problem too, where we actually apply this World of Warcraft paradigm to this grand challenge here, and then we put the individual within the world, and you won't be able to. There is some stereo in here, but when you're wearing headphones, you can literally hear the troops walking around you. Like literally, your eyes lock to the left and track with them because the internal representation in your mind is so effective with this sonification technique. Okay. Okay. So let me just jump ahead. Well, no, I like this example so much, I'm going to use it. This is what happens when you jam in a bunch of slides, 4 minutes before the presentation, because you want to show recent stuff, right? That's okay. On the left, you have an indigenous map, okay? And on the right, you have a map of European origin. And one of the interesting things about the one on the left is it is multimodal, right? You have visually perceived notches, which represent geographic landforms, but it's also tactile. I actually don't know whether the intention was to make it multimodal or if that was just the most effective way to represent it, right? But it shows how, if you think carefully, you can design a representation so you actually don't have to translate it back and forth. And that's sort of what we're going for with this multimodal paradigm. And I think I've got 3 minutes left, or 10 minutes. Oh, awesome. Okay. All right. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about this theoretical model that I created, okay? And I developed it. The thing on the left is called a retinotopic map. And just think of it, so the retina has a certain architecture. Just as you know from everyday life, the center of vision, the fovea, is like the thumbnail. That's the field of view in front of you, okay? And everything else gets super low res the moment it tapers off. And that's shown with this sharp spike in the center that tapers off at the edge of it, right? But I don't have time to really get into it. Well, the main point about that is that the closer you get to the fovea center of vision, the more you're looking at fine details like texture, okay? But then as you go out, you're picking up shape information. Just think of that as like the shape of objects, like photographing actually, one of many ways to think about it. And then you have larger relational information, okay? Which is like the relation between the tables and the objects in this room. or buildings as you're walking down the street, okay? And what I developed was a way I'm missing something. Oh, it's okay, yeah. So what I developed was a way to distinguish pictures, diagrams, and text based on how relational information or object information is pictorially and symbolically represented, okay? And the way I characterize pictorial information, which in a multimodal context is called iconic information, was pictorial information is the light reflected from the page or produced from the page, okay? It's impinging upon this direct pocket, okay? Whereas a symbolic information is the category that you're bringing to it, okay? Which is the conceptual information, the conceptual category, okay? So I'm not going to get into this theoretical stuff, but let me illustrate an example of the big problem, okay? If this will work, okay? So this is a financial chart, and this is how it is currently made accessible if people go through the effort to do so.
The graph of the IBM stock price and volume indicates that the stock price rose to a peak of $120 in early June, fell to a low of $105 in early July, rose to the maximum price of $133 in September, and fell to the minimum price of $87 in late October. The share volume was relatively constant with larger, transient peaks near the minimum in July and October.
So, all right, so, I mean, the question about the differences between a picture and a sentence is like an ancient question. People are still debating about it, right? But what we know intuitively from everyday life is what we just heard is probably not what the author described and intended. Let's think about some of the things you get from the visual representation. You get a feeling of the overall trend, okay? You pick up a pattern, okay? It allows you to ask questions, okay? You can think of it as conceptual. But these things are not afforded by this text description, okay? So some early sort of informal experiments demonstrate what might be possible, though. So I'm just going to play these sounds real quick, if it works. Oh, cannot play media. You never know what'll happen. Okay, now try. Okay, it's okay. So anyway, what that sounds like is in this dark line in the middle, it's middle C, okay? And it goes along, and then you have a rising tone that goes up, while middle C stays constant. And it's a closed shape, right? So we did an informal experiment with people drawing shapes, and I'd say about 85% were able to replicate this just from the sound, okay? Now, there was great diversity, though, as well, where some people had it flaring in, some people had it flaring out, but the basic shape was conveyed, maybe not the same orientation. I think there were lots of variables depending on your background, such as musical training, for example, maybe culture, we're not sure. Okay? But it demonstrates that there are some perceptual cues that are what we call cross-modal. Okay? This is a big area of research in psychology, not as well applied in design. Okay? I hope this one works.
Right button is pressed, panning to the right. Left button is pressed, panning to the left. Right button is pressed.
So this is an early prototype that really demonstrates the type of thing that's possible. Okay, so in the interactive version, you can scrub back and forth, and we have stereo so that you know the position of the line on the chart. Okay? And what's going on here? So you have middle C, which is this horizon line. Okay, you have the rising and falling tone. Okay, and in the middle we have noise, clips to fit the contour. So this is basically a sonic outline drawing. And actually this spun out of our earliest attempts trying to solve the Williams March thing. Okay, because one of the big problems was that it's a complicated shape, and it's not just hugging the horizon line. It's actually this contour that's rising above it and falling down. And so we needed a way to show that shape, the shape as it's getting thicker and thinner and rising and falling simultaneously. And so that actually turned out to be hard to do, but in pursuit of that, we did find this very Okay? Okay. And bar chart, basically the same concept, but not working, which is fine. Okay? So, so let me show you an early attempt at this. Well, by early, I mean last year. Okay? Why can we not hear anything? Can anyone hear anything? Okay. Anyway, usually it's easier to hear. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so with this you can like a sonic version of it. What that dimension So you sort of get the idea, but there were problems with this, as you know, okay, as you can sort of tell. And Richard's demo actually shows what we think is a solution, okay? So here's another attempt.
In this iteration,
Sorry. So here we're using the same convention, where we've got noise within the object, and but the noise is spread out over the frequency range of the depicted shape, right? Now, obviously, this would take a lot of training, right? But I think in every representation requires some training, but as much as possible, we want to build upon the intuitions you get from the physical world, okay? So, since I've got 5 minutes left, let me just cut to the chase, okay? Actually, that's the next slide anyway, okay? So, to really just break this down, okay, here's the easiest intuition to build upon. We can get into a lot of stuff about what's called internal mental simulation, okay? But let me just go to the most intuitive part, okay? We develop in a physical world, okay? And so an object such as this, it has a natural shape that I can pick up visually, and it has a natural sound, okay? And it has a natural feeling I get when I touch it, right? And so there are some natural cross-modal correspondences. And so the big takeaway is this, so I don't have to get too much technical stuff, right? The more the thing you're trying to represent corresponds to something that can be sensed in the world, you can think of that as a concrete structure in contrast to an abstract category. Okay? And this is stuff that we get for free in terms of our capability to understand it by developing in the world. Okay? If I'm growing up in Dallas, Texas, where I grew up, or if someone's growing up in Hong Kong, or mainland China, or Africa, okay, you live in a world where light is reflecting through surfaces. Okay? And so if someone makes a series of marks that replicates those optical structures, it might not mean the same thing, but you probably will be able to make use of that representation. The same thing goes with sound, right? Like large objects resonate at lower frequencies, for example. Small objects resonate at high frequencies, okay? So there's these certain relationships where if you appeal to these basic things in the everyday world, then it will probably be effective for representing an iconic representation. But to wrap this up, but the tricky part is when you get to this other dimension. Okay, conceptual category, the abstract idea of a square, the abstract idea of a cat, okay, a category. For this, you probably need to use some kind of symbolic representation. Spoken language, written language, gesture, so on and so forth. Anyway, I think that's the most I can get to right now. Later when we do our virtual lab tour, I'll be talking more about the perception action cycle and affordances, so I can maybe loop back on some of this, but this is sort of the basic idea for now. Thank you so much. All right.
questions to Peter? Peter will lead the hands-on class activity this afternoon. So he will be doing more about any other questions? Right? Immediate application is visual impaired persons. It's actually very useful for them to understand.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
test.
Not yet. We're getting ready to. Yeah. We actually, very interesting, we actually will have, hopefully joining this program is Brandon Biggs. He actually is identified he's blind, okay? And but he's a great developer. He's already done like several prototypes for us. And so hopefully he'll be joining the program once we line up his internship. And it's great because he actually is very connected to a lot of actually developer communities with people who would be potential users from this. So the next phase is sort of kicking in with these new students. Yeah, so it'll be amazing. We'll have someone who doesn't use vision potentially part of this program, right? But that's great because our contribution actually is the non-visual data analytics part, and so I think that there will be a lot of innovation within the next 9 months.
Just even if planning questions like inverse engineering, so hearing the sound and then convert it into the feature.
Yeah, no, that's actually one of the things we're looking at as a way to test it. Yeah, I mean another one. I think that's a really good way to do it. Actually, I'd like to follow up with you about that. But another one for people who do see is eye tracking. Okay, so because as you might experience if the stereo in this room works well enough, like your eyes literally track with the sound of the troops moving around, and so you could actually, for people who are using vision, but actually it's interesting because when we have time to talk about it. A lot of stuff that we think of as visual in terms of the visual cortex, it's actually not really visual, it's spatial, okay? And so you're using it for every perceptual mode. And so for people who are blind, even if it was from birth, they're using a lot of the brain regions we use for vision, right? And so a lot of the eye tracking stuff might work there. We're not sure yet, though. No, that's a really good idea, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
One question from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you say with multimodal interaction, there will probably need to be some training, especially for more difficult images.
Yeah.
So how do you propose to train someone if they're, say, visually impaired, train them to kind of see the sound? How will you explain what they're supposed to see?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There's actually a lot of work in this area. Amira Meady has already developed a training program for a related area. It's similar. The interesting thing, so I've worked with several blind students at this point, and a lot of the stuff that we think of, let's take a student that I was recently working with, okay? He navigates Toronto just fine, he plays Sonic computer games, okay? And actually one of the ways we discovered this World of Warcraft thing is I was trying to make a theoretical modeling assignment accessible to him because it required someone to make a picture. And the way we came up with it, it's like, okay, well, I know that you're navigating the city, okay? So I know that you have that representation, right? Okay? So he actually did an assignment by developing a level of a Sonic computer game, okay? And so I think that it's still an open question about how to do that, but I think the key is reverting to cues that we know are known anyway, right? So basically what we did is we just basically drew the model as terrain, okay, like in this level of the computer game, and then he was perfectly able to make use of it. He did not, I actually bought a tactile tool where you can draw cubes and stuff. He wasn't able to make use of the picture, which is surprising because there's a lot of empirical evidence from Dr. John Kenny at the University of Toronto Scarborough that says that people who've never been able to see are able to use perspective. And so it's interesting, he should have been able, according to that research, he should have been able to use it. He wasn't able to, right? But definitely the metaphor of the city, okay, and navigation, we were able to accomplish almost everything we wanted to. And through that, there's a big realization which I think is very powerful, okay? And that is, like a map is one of the most classic models we have. And data analytics is very much the practice of modeling things, right? And so by starting with mapping, actually, and developing conventions that make that work, we can actually apply those techniques to data analytics, interfaces, like the graphical user interface. It's basically a map of your desktop, right? So I think the answer to that is peeling down to cues that we know they're using already. And they pretty much cut across every perceptual mode, such as city navigation and mapping and stuff like that.
Okay, let's continue to talk with Richard later on this
Yeah.
topic. Okay, thanks again, Peter.
All right.
Sarah?